Hi, I'm Holly Ittle. I'm the exhibitions director here at the Dairy Barn Art Center. Today we are speaking with 3 artists who are featured in OH+5 Contemporary Art of Our Region here at the Dairy Barn Art Center. You can catch the show now through March 13, 2022. Welcome. Could each of you take a turn, please, introducing yourself? Susan, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm Susan Feller from eastern part of West Virginia, and I'm a fiber artist.
Hi, thanks. Annette?
I am Alyson Annette Eshelman, and I'm from Springfield, Ohio, and I'm also a fiber artist.
Wonderful. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Robert Villamagna, and I'm in Wheeling, West Virginia, and I work in repurposed metals and mixed media.
Wonderful. So the 4 of you are going to have the 3 of you will have a conversation, and I'm going to just step back and let the 3 of you talk about your artwork. You can talk specifically about the pieces that are in the show or your body of work as a whole. And I hope this conversation just moves along organically and you enjoy each other's time together.
Great, thanks.
Great. Okay, who's starting?
I think you start, Bob.
Okay, so I guess if we're talking about our pieces, and I have 2 mixed media pieces in there, composition in she minor, and which is kind of a figure of a female coal miner. And when I came up with the title, I think I was so pumped about it. That's the whole reason I made the piece. Okay, and then the other piece is Chicken Thief, and another mixed media piece with a lot of repurposed metal. And that particular piece was given birth when we bought a dozen organic eggs, and there on the label was this kid holding a chicken. So that kind of inspired it. So, all right, go. Who's next? Unless somebody has a question. Go.
Well, what processes were used in making your art, Bob?
In my work, it's basically, I'll make a rough draft, and then I'll sketch out whatever my idea is on a big panel pretty loosely using a Sharpie. And then I just start adding materials, and 75% of those materials might be repurposed lithographed metal, which comes from a lot of things like old signage and tin cans and stuff like that. And then I just kind of cut it into shape until I'm hoping that this idea I have, that it appears. I leave a lot of room for serendipity, because I think if I know exactly how it's going to turn out, I'm going to be bored. And that's probably why I never became a portrait painter, because you know how it's going to turn out. And besides, I'm not very good at painting portraits. So it's probably a combination of that. So how about you?
How about you, Susan? What's your process?
Well, my process oftentimes is focused on human impact on nature. So I can look out my window and there's a beautiful forest, and then I can think about logging, or in the piece that's in the show, I found a Google Earth image of the lower part of West Virginia, where a lot of mountaintop removal work is happening. And I used a lot of mixed media, so all in textiles. Some pin loom weaving, so very small weaving, and created some mountains that way by stuffing them. The rug hooking is my main technique. So switching out the values to, again, just get a hint of the mountains. And then I did some applique for the actual removed mountains, the gray areas. And I created a small pin that can be moved around on the piece. So the title is Mountaintop Removal Puzzle. And you can take the pin and move it in different spots, but it ends up being removable.
Interesting.
So in your fiber work, what do you work on, Annette?
So I am currently working in needle felting, and I do figural sculptures. And so my piece that's in the OH+5 exhibit is titled Guardian of the Lake of Tears. And she is they're wire armature. So I start with like a base for her. She has a base and she is connected to a large piece of wood, like just a cut off slab of wood, part of a stump or whatever. And then I use like 12 gauge wire and build an armature around that. And then I use wool roving, just core roving. That's just a natural color roving, and I build up that form. And then I start adding, you know, the skin colors and the build up form might look like this. I try to keep all and the head is separate. So I build the head and hands separately. So a head might look like this. She has no hair yet, and she still needs quite a bit of work, or a head could look like this. This is actually the original head for Guardian of the Lake of Tears, but the wire, I was using a cheap wire and the wire broke. So I had to make a new head. So her new head is a second head, not my first choice. And
that's interesting because you're talking about different materials, and Bob was saying, well, he uses this and that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of our work is problem solving about composition, about how to use the different materials and putting them together.
I think that's probably true. I use
a lot of fun.
Locks for hair. So this is like what actually comes off the sheet, and it's just sort of cleaned and dyed. Sometimes it's not really cleaned, so you kind of got to pick stuff out, which is fine too. It kind of makes their hair look cool. So anyway, that's what I have. That's what I've been working on since August, is needle felted sculptures, figural sculptures.
So are the majority of your sculpture pieces, are they figurative for the most part?
Of this body of work, yes. Again, I just started these figures. My first figure is one prior to this. So Guardian of the Lake of Tears is my second figure that I have done. Generally, my sculptures are just the torso. So I just started adding on heads in August. I don't know. It's just the direction I'm going. And I actually made a full body just last week with toes and everything. So anyway.
It's probably good. Go ahead.
I've been following you on Instagram, Bob. So some of your inspiration seems to be series, and then off you go on, oh, I found something in my pile and I'm doing it again. Do you find you run out, or is a series, how long does the series go, I guess is my question.
When I get with it, that's, you know, I'd like to be one of those artists. You know, I think it's fantastic to go into a gallery or a museum and you see an art representative works there, and they've got like 30 or 40, 50 pieces, and it's all part of a series, and they've explored this thing, and it's blowing your mind, you know, because of all these the different ways they approach this one item or this one series or this one subject. And you know what? I get bored. I guess I get bored. You know, I try to do this a few times, and sometimes I think that I'm going to do that, and it doesn't happen. So it's really not based on material. It's based on like my mind's just kind of jumping around, and I want to do all this stuff. So I'm not ever going to be. Nobody's ever going to really take me seriously in that regard. You know what I mean? Like I don't have that in me. So so it comes down to you know how I feel, or you know, or I could be walking out of Kroger's and I hear some conversation about somebody talking about their brother-in-law, and I go, "That's an idea. I'm going to make a piece about that conversation as soon as I'm getting started on it." You know, so you can't let me go anywhere or do anything because it's just going to mess up my whole. You know, my whole chain of thoughts, I guess, and new thoughts come. But I guess that's, you know, it's okay. I just want to make stuff.
Mm-hmm. I found in 2020 that I was writing down all these quotes of listening to too much news and not going out and really being distracted, let's put it that way. And I felt that I needed to chronicle that. I don't typically journal, but I I did create two runners that pretty much are a monthly journal for that time period. And I thought there was too much angst going on at the end of the year, and maybe I was going to do another 6 months or another full year. And I looked at my work and I thought about how very emotional I was when I was working through it, and that I was done. And I wanted to separate from that. So for several months, I just explored nature, and I feel so much better. That's what I think is really important, that my work as I'm working helps me process what the subject is, or actually gets me away. I mean, I can do some just pulling the loops, and it's meditative.
Yeah.
Right.
So do others find that, you know, when you focus on a piece of work, everything else is gone around you?
Yeah, for years I have taught, or really not taught, facilitated art making with folks with dementia and with folks with in recovery, drug and alcohol recovering. And I have never used that process for myself until 2021, which is when these pieces all started. Mainly because I just didn't have time. But I had a stroke in almost a year ago. In 5 days, it'll be a year ago. And I don't know, there was a lot of, did she really have a stroke, back and forth with doctors for 6 months, and
Wow.
and some medical malpractice that had happened, which is neither here. I mean, anyway, in 6 months, then I took a medical leave of absence from my job and just started focusing on myself. There were other illnesses in my family also at the time. So we were all, the four of us who live here together, we're all kind of emotional and crazy, and not really, like, I shouldn't say crazy because anyway, but kind of just very not well. And when I took my medical leave of absence, I determined that I was going to start making art. Because I have a huge body of work, but I hadn't really focused on making art in any kind of way. Like, oh, I'll make the piece that's kind of over there, my shoulder, I made that in 2020, you know, like just little things. Oh, I'll just make something just to get myself working, but not really serious. And the day after I took my medical leave of absence, I started making art, and I had a few sculptures that weren't finished. So I worked on that. And then I was like, I've really always wanted to learn how to do these figural sculptures. Why don't I just teach myself now? And I have used the processes that I have facilitated with my dementia folks and my folks in recovery to really bring myself into recovery. Like, I had surgery and all that kind of stuff. And even though it was bad, I'm in such a much better place just because I'm making art, just because I have a release. And that's what I believe art can do for us. Whether it's ever shown or whether I dump it in the trash, at least I have done something, and the creativeness gets me out of my space. Just like you were saying, Susan, I just go beyond where I'm at, and I can just work.
But here you are in the show instead of the trash. Here, yeah. You know, that's pretty cool though, because, you know, a lot of people could be in that situation you were in and get themselves in such a funk that they can't even, you know, how many people have you met who say, I don't even feel like making anything anymore. I don't even feel like painting. I don't feel like drawing. I don't feel like, you know, which is, but I understand, because I was an art therapist for 5 years. So I kind of get that aspect of it, but you see a lot of people that, unfortunately, when life throws them a curve, it has the opposite effect of what you just shared. So your stuff, that's awesome.
Well, and you have to force yourself. I mean, you know, I didn't feel like doing it, but I knew, because I had been facilitating this for many years, I knew that really the only way, because I am an artist and that is in me, the only way was for me to do that. And so I just did. And it's been fun.
How was the isolation time period for you during COVID? Did you become more productive, or experience a time period, Bob?
Well, in regards to the isolation, and it totally sucked. Okay. But but I'm very, very fortunate because I have a spouse who we were on the same suck page. Okay. It was like terrible. And but except for about 6 weeks around the time when I had COVID, which was about 6 months before the vaccine came out, I was in such really bad shape, and my wife a little less so, that I didn't have the strength to work on anything. And it took me a time where I started out working a half hour a day and then an hour a day. I mean, I'd be exhausted in 30 minutes. But other than that period, during that big COVID shutdown, yeah, I made more art than I've been making in a long time. So that was good because there wasn't anything else to do. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't do anything other than maybe take a walk. And well, you guys know, it was like crazy. So that's what we kept doing. I kept making work.
Yeah,
So.
I took it as I called it an artist in residency. Of course,
Yeah.
I didn't have to travel anywhere, and I really did like the lodging accommodations.
Yeah, right.
But I really focused on studio time, and like both of you said, there have been other responsibilities, and they fell completely off my calendar. I'm an instructor. I travel. I exhibit. I go to shows, etc. It was all gone. Everything was gone. But Zoom happened, and it's a whole new learning technique. And I'm trying to learn how to teach online and to communicate and keep a community going that way for me.
Sure.
It's really been fun reaching out to a new network.
Well, the technology definitely helps, and in order to keep in touch with with other artists and other people, and even on the that's probably even with the Instagram, for example, it was just great to be able to look at that every day. And I know there's a lot of pros and cons about that kind of thing, but I guess it depends what you're looking for and what you're searching for and what you're reading, what you're following. But I just find it really uplifting when I see other artists, what they're doing and where they're at, especially during that period when you weren't going, museums were shut down, there weren't any galleries open, and so you could at least see that other people were making work. And a portion of that work was about what was going on in regards to COVID. But that was just a portion of it. Everything else was just people making work and seeing what's happening. That was good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this series of talks is a great example of how the Dairy Barn is able to provide conversations amongst all the artists, and then we're able to be sharing this to such a wider audience than if we had all met up at an opening.
Oh no, that's true. That's true. And the other thing is what you said earlier about the distance. And I realized, okay, so if I'm going to come to see the show, and most of the time over the years I've tried to come and see the Ohio+5 show, and plus my wife and I come almost every time to see the quilt show, even though neither one of us are quilters, but I'm just so inspired by that work. It just blows my mind. And but when every time I do it, it's a 5-hour commitment of just driving, round trip. And I'm thinking, why is it that every decent show that I'm in, it's either a 5 or 6 or 8 hour damn drive? You know what I mean? Like, it's like a lot of times I don't get to see the shows that I'm in. Maybe you guys are the same way. It's just tough. What are you going to do? But, I'm glad to be in it. But that's why it's great too sometimes when they show when somebody like Holly takes time to maybe, I haven't seen it yet, but like a walkthrough of the exhibition, and it's never the same as being there, but it's the next best thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's about a 2-hour drive one way for myself. So I haven't been back down. I delivered the work and I want to get back down, but that commitment of 4 hours plus the,
Right.
I'll be there for a couple hours, looking at the show also. I am going to go see it, but I just have to figure out when that's going to be. I can pencil that into our calendar.
I gotcha.
Yeah, it's a 5-hour trip for me, one way.
One way.
Oh, one way. Whoa. So
It's an
that is-
overnight. Oh, yeah. It's 4.5 hours to get across the state.
Well, I know sometimes, like when I'm doing occasionally in a show down at Beckley, West Virginia, which that's for me is about a 7-hour round trip or something like that. And or when that happens, my wife and I usually would just say, okay, let's make it a weekend. We'll stay overnight and we'll visit some antique shops and that kind of thing, kind of tie some other stuff together. Because, like you say, it is a big commitment, but that's, you even got a longer drive for this show than we do,
Mhm.
Yeah, I finally shipped the piece. When I show in Charleston, that's a 5-hour drive, but if I can get up really early and deliver the work and drive back, then I've done it. And maybe, like you said, when the show's up, it's an overnight at that point. You go down, you see it, you just build in some more, cultural reasons to be out on the road other than stopping for gas. And it's fun.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but I want to share a real quick story. And then if Holly wants to cut it out, But in I think it was the second. This has been years ago. This has to be, I don't know. I'm going to guess 12 years ago, maybe. But it was the second time that I was in the Ohio+5 show. Okay. And what happened was I told my wife, I said, you know what? Instead of me, instead of us driving this work to Athens, how about if I ship it and then after the show opens, we'll go to the show instead of making double trips, So we did. I packaged up the work and I took it to FedEx and I sent it to Athens. And this is a time, well, this has to be just before we got a cell phone because we still had an answer machine. So this has to be at least 12, 14 years ago. All right. So what happens is it was a couple days after I sent it and the opening's coming up on the weekend. And I get, we come home from somewhere and there is the answer machine blinking and I hit it. And it is at that time, the exhibitions coordinator, or whatever for the dairy barn. And she says, Robert, we received your work and one piece is fine, but the other piece is broken. And then there was a pause, and I'll never forget this the rest of my life. She goes, like a cracker. And I never heard, I go, like a cracker. Oh my God, my work's broken like a cracker. So I called. And I was somewhere between laughing about the cracker part, but also bummed because it broke. And they said, but the show opens tomorrow night. If you can come tomorrow morning and fix it. And I did. My wife and I, we drove out and repaired it. And we saw the show. And after all, but anyway, that's my story. But it all worked out. Sometimes things happen. And, in the end, it wasn't FedEx's fault. When I really looked at my packaging, I thought I did a good job. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's always scary to ship work. I have shown work in a museum out in Maryland. And I have actually driven the 10 hours there to deliver the work and not seen the show and then driven back to pick the work up because it is too stressful for me. When I was making art quilts, rolling it up, putting it in a box was so much easier than trying to ship sculptures that I'm not sure are going to make it there in one piece. So yeah, it's stressful. I don't like doing it. I try to show within my region just so I don't have to ship.
I got you.
Yeah.
Doesn't it seem though, it's sad that some of the biggest opportunities seem to be far away, don't they? Or maybe it's my imagination, but anyway.
Yeah, and then work also gets expensive, heavy. Bob, yours is
Oh,
really
right.
definitely, or
Yeah.
awkward in, packaging a sculpture. Or if it's fiber art, it's fine. My rugs are not that heavy, but then if I put them on the wall and frame them, there's more weight. So there's cost and there's packaging, certainly. And, yeah, it cuts into deciding whether you want. And I still love seeing an exhibit. I just love walking around and seeing an exhibit.
Oh, me is, yeah, I hear you.
So directing our conversation a little bit differently then, with our work, what is it that we want the viewer to see in the work? What do you think you want the viewer to see?
Well,
In my work, I want them to respond happily or interested. So I use traditional work. Textiles are always something different. So that you might want to get closer because it leads you to wanting to touch it. Preferably not, but your eye. So by coming closer and then finally reading my label, I hope that people start a conversation with each other or themselves about the subject. But if they're just interested in the coloring, like the pieces behind me, that's fine too. I'd like a deeper conversation about human impact on nature. How about you?
In regards to my work, like I'm okay with however the viewer interprets my work. I have no problem with it. A lot of times they are interpreting it on a different level or in a different way than my original intention. And I've come to accept that. There's only one thing that bugs me, and that is when somebody says, "Oh, look, he's a recycler." Oh my God, that's it. That's all you got out of it. You saw some materials that were repurposed. Oh man, that drives me nuts. I don't even want to hear that. I sure I use these materials, but that's not my primary goal. I just like things that are raw and gritty and rusty and bent and all that. But I'm not trying to save the world through recycling, even though I believe in recycling, but that's not my purpose. So if I can get somebody beyond that, then okay, whatever they bring to the work or whatever they take from it, I'm okay with it. Other than that, not that I can control it.
Right. I think for my work, I use a lot of flower symbolism in this recent work, and some color ideas that I put in the work, the reason for these specific things. But the viewer, like you say, Bob, the viewer is not going to see that. I mean, unless they know, Victorian flower language or whatever, they're not going to know that. It's really in there for me. So I'm hoping that they see the little tiny things. Like in Guardian of the Lake of Tears, there is a tiny human underneath, not a real human, a little doll, underneath the guardian, and she's dark. You can't really see her, and it takes a lot of looking to see. And I hope that viewers question, what the heck is that little person doing under there? Why are these mountains here? Or what? I'm hoping that there are lots of questions that folks ask themselves. Whether they find the answer or not, that doesn't matter. But I like my work to just evoke some questions in people's minds. So,
Right.
This has been a great conversation. I certainly look forward to meeting both of you in person. Bob, I know I will. And Annette, I'll look out for your work.
thank you.
Let's go through some quick fire questions.
Yeah.
All right. Clay or paint preference?
Clay.
Probably ain't, but it seems like all my friends are clay artists. But anyway.
I'm trying paint, but it's fiber. So I paint with fiber.
Oh, good.
Do you like to visit a gallery or a more formal setting of a museum?
Museum.
I love both, especially galleries that are like on the format of ones that are in Manhattan, for example. So I can get as much out of either one depending on what the work is.
Yeah, I like a learning experience, and it can be anything at this point.
Right.
Are you a
I'm
morning
partial
studio?
to I was just gonna say I'm partial to museums because that's where my work has been until I took my leave of absence and resigned, or not resigned, but retired. I just love museums.
Are you get into the studio in the morning, or do you enjoy going outside or being energized by some other walk?
Well, for me, I take a bike class in the morning, a spin class at 5:30. So that's the way my day starts off. And then I go to the studio when I get back home. So I guess that's the equivalent of my hike when it's, especially in bad weather. But anyway.
Yeah, I like to go outside, and in my case, it's to feed the animals, get that going, and I find that energizes me, especially if I need to. It's too cold, and I am coming back in.
Right.
Annette?
Of the two, I guess I would have to say morning studio time because I'm not much of an outside walking. I get up and start my day with a reading and meditation exercise. So being outside, it would take nice warm weather for me to want to be outside.
Of course, yeah.
So I only have April to September.
But we each have a way to get ready to get into that studio space. Do you sketch on paper or digitally?
Paper, cardboard. You know what? I love the digital world, but I guess I like that feeling of a marker or a pencil against that surface. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
whatever.
I'm experimenting with digital. I did get a new iPad and a pencil, and I'm exploring it. And it's an interesting palette, but I like, as Bob said, I like to feel my tools and see the immediate result. And yeah, all of it.
I'm definitely paper. I have a teenager who sketches on her phone with her finger, and some of her work is really amazing. And I'm just like, why do you even want to do that? But she's pretty good. She loves it. I have no desire. Paper is where I go.
I find digitally, I have to go to the computer to find my work, where sketching, it's all over. I can just spread it out. I think that's the reward. That's where I'm never gonna, go beyond that part of it. Most traditional materials or alternative materials. That was an interesting question. I just use whatever.
Well, for me, it's probably alternative, because I'm drawn to those. It doesn't mean I don't use traditional paints and mark making tools. I do, but the materials most of the time it's it's junk. It's stuff.
I think mine's a mixture of both. Fiber's kind of a traditional tool, I think. Needle felting is new, like it was just developed in the, I want to say late 80s, maybe early 90s. So I don't know if you would consider that, alternative.
Ethnically, it's probably a really old technique. It's just being reintroduced into our world.
Felting, felting as a medium is very old technique, but needle felting, where you use just a little needle, is fairly new because it is.
Yeah. And in the world of rug hooking, when we say alternative materials, we mean something other than wool fabric.
Yeah, like wire. Do you use wire and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I do. I use whatever is able to be manipulated into the form that I want, or consistently loops or shapes. Certainly. Yeah. And let's see if I get back to my computer. Oh, I like this one. Sun or moon?
Sun. Even though I think the moon's beautiful, man, but when the sunlight is out, it changes my world every day. And like right now, I'm looking out my studio door and the sun's shining, bouncing off the snow, and I'm pumped about it.
For me, it's the moon because it reflects the sun, and I want to reflect.
Ooh, you're so deep.
That's
And
my job, reflecting the sun.
Yeah, that's good.
I have found, especially these last couple of years staying home, going out and at all different times of night and just being in awe of the moon and its different phases and trying to guess where it's going to come up and in its moonrise. And for whatever reason, I haven't understood it yet. It just jumps. It doesn't go gradually. So I'm fascinated by the moon. The sun does energize me, though. I am very happy with it, but the moon is my preference. And when you're in the studio, do you listen to music or podcasts?
When I'm in the studio, I listen to nothing. I need to work in silence. It would distract me if I did anything else. However, if I'm just listening, I prefer a podcast because generally I'm learning. I love music, but it's not something that I use as, I don't know, a way to, I don't know. It's just not something I use much.
Bob?
I listen to podcasts and on occasion, but it's so rare. It's probably less than 10% of my studio time. The other 90%, more than likely, is going to be music, and it could be a big variety, from blues music to Regina Spektor to whatever. But you know, and I like that in the background, and I think there's so many podcasts out there. I'll see something about a podcast, and I say, I want to listen to that. But somehow what happens is I'll be working and then I stop because it gets so interesting. So I don't think that's supportive to my process in the studio. You know what I mean? Even though I think there's really cool, especially a couple people have suggested some artist podcasts to me, and I start listening to them, and then I stop working because I'm going, "Hey, this guy's awesome," or "This woman's great." You know. Anyway, how about you?
It's podcasts probably. Music in the studio hasn't supported my work, I guess, let's put it that way. But I agree with you. I'm an avid reader. So when I started working with my hands, you can't read a book at the same time. And so I went to audiobooks and switching to podcasts or download books. But I find that the book has to, as you guys were saying, it can't be something that you really want to be learning from. It's more a conversation in the background.
Right.
So another voice in my studio with me.
Sure.
This has been wonderful. This has
been very good.
Kind of cool, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a good thing. I was thinking about that while we were doing it. So
yeah, and I think all three of us volunteered wisely. So we're happy to be done and in the can. Thank you very much, Holly. But it's been fun.
Thanks. That was a really awesome conversation. That was really fun to listen to.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions that spurred us on, but we didn't really use a ton of them
Okay.
as in asking, but I think we covered most of them.
Yeah. I think you touched on a lot of it. And yeah, these were just a touch, you know, a place to start, a place to jump from. So you guys did exactly what I was hoping would happen. It's awesome.
well, Holly,
yeah.
Holly, thanks for making it happen.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's a lot of time and energy that you have to put into these things to make them. It's one thing to have an idea, but actually to put it forth, I think it's great. And we get the benefit from that. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. I appreciate that a lot.
I'm also going to say I'm using this as a template for other things to happen within the region. So thank you.
That's awesome. Cool. Thanks.
We'll be
Thank you all so much for participating today. You can catch OH+5 at the Dairy Barn now through March 13th, 2022. Our gallery is open Thursday through Sunday, 12 to 5. You can find us at dairybarn.org. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.